Are you ready to unlock your full potential and maximize your productivity? Look no further than Productivity Smarts, the ultimate audio podcast hosted by renowned productivity expert Gerald J. Leonard. In every episode, Gerald shares captivating stories, invaluable tips, and cutting-edge strategies that will transform the way you approach productivity. Whether you're looking to reduce stress, overcome overwhelm, or simply get more done in less time, Productivity Smarts has got you covered. But that's not all. You'll also gain inspiration from real-life success stories of individuals who have achieved greatness through productivity. Plus, you'll learn the latest tools, techniques, and habits that will help you achieve a new level of happiness and fulfillment in your personal and professional life. So why wait? Join us every week as we delve into the exciting world of productivity and help you unleash your full potential. Get ready to take your productivity to the next level with Productivity Smarts. As a productivity expert and host of the Productivity Smarts podcast, Gerald J. Leonard has been a proud supporter of Kiva since 2011. Kiva is a non-profit organization that helps entrepreneurs in third world countries access the capital they need to start or grow their businesses. By making a small loan through Kiva, you can help these entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, support their families, and contribute to their local economies. And with a repayment rate of over 96%, your loan can be re-lent to another entrepreneur once it's repaid, creating a ripple effect of positive change. So if you're looking for a meaningful way to make a difference in the world, consider making a loan through Kiva. With loans as small as $25, anyone can be a micro-lender and help change lives. Visit kiva.org to learn more and start lending today.
Well, today I'm speaking with Dr. Andrew Kadar. He is a physician at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and a diplomat of the American Board of Anesthesiology and a fellow of the American Society of Anesthesiologists. He graduated from Yale University School of Medicine and completed his residency at Stanford and Harvard University. Dr. Kadar, who studied in the writers program at UCLA Extension and the Antioch University MFA writing program, has had his work featured in The Atlantic, the Los Angeles Times, the New York Daily News, and many more. Dr. Kadar, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent. And around this time of the year, happy Thanksgiving as well.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving and the upcoming holidays.
Exactly. So listen, as I get started, I always ask a couple of questions around music. As you know, I'm a musician. And so one of my questions I always like to ask guests is, what's your favorite genre or style of music?
I think my favorite is what I grew up with, which is 60s and 70s pop rock kind of stuff.
Okay.
Beatles, Elton John, Mamas and Papas. But also Jimmy Buffett. I love Jimmy Buffett. I often finish the week in the operating room playing It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, so is that one of your favorite songs then? That you enjoy? It's 5 o'clock.
Yeah, it means you can go have a good time.
Excellent. So listen, obviously you've studied and have done very well for yourself as a doctor, and the book is an amazing story because it also shares insights that you experienced as a patient that we'll get into talking about here shortly. But what do you think for yourself with the mindset that this is the Productivity Smarts community that's listening? What are the things that made you so successful in your career? What's that one or two things that you can point to?
In medicine and probably in lots of other fields, it's keeping up because things are constantly changing. Virtually none of the medicines that I use today were around when I was going through my training. So the basic concepts remain the same.
Right.
But you have to keep up.
Gotcha.
And you have to work hard at it.
Right. So you really have to work hard at just continually improving yourself and growing. In fact, you probably have to grow faster than the medicine is changing or the things are happening so you can stay on top of it. Would that be a way of looking at it?
Yeah, I think you have to put an awful lot of effort into staying current. The other thing is showing up because, for example, nothing happens in the operating room until the anesthesiologist shows up because
Hmm.
you can't start the surgery until the patient's ready to have surgery.
Right.
And that doesn't happen unless the anesthesiologist is there. So being punctual and being available when needed is crucial.
That's a lot in life as well. Wouldn't you agree that, you have to, one, stay up on the trends and where things are going. But the second thing is you have to actually show up and be there. And I think with all of the challenges that we're facing around the world, just in different societies and culture and everything else that we're going through, I think that's a great way to start this discussion is, keep improving yourself and keep showing up. So I want to jump into your book. You were going to say something.
No, I was just agreeing with what you were saying.
Excellent, excellent. So your book, Getting Better, and it's really your story. It's a doctor's story about resilience and just going through it and being on the other side as a patient and all the things that you had to do. What inspired you to, take that story and put it into a book?
My story is very similar to lots of other patient stories.
Right.
First of all, I thought I was perfectly healthy, and I had lots of reasons to think that. I never smoked, exercised regularly, was never overweight, didn't have high blood pressure, had a good family history. My father lived to be 94. We were hiking together in the Canadian Rockies when he was 86.
Wow.
So I had no expectation that I would, at a relatively young age, all of a sudden have symptoms of heart disease and end up having what's known as the widowmaker because it's serious enough that it often causes a sudden death. And the way it happened too, I was working out in the gym, and about 9 minutes into a pretty intense workout on the elliptical, all of a sudden I started feeling some burning under my breastbone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stopped and it went away right away. Now, I knew I didn't have heart disease, never had any symptoms. I also knew all about denial, which
Right.
is the tendency to basically write off serious symptoms. That happens a lot. I mean, nobody wants to have cancer or heart disease. So, the slump is not so big. It's not so hard. It'll go away on its own. Or this chest pain, it's nothing significant. And of course, a lot of time it is nothing significant because
Right.
most chest pain is not due to heart disease. But there's a saying in medicine that denial is not just a river in Egypt. And even though I work at a hospital that treats lots of patients with heart disease, and I've treated many people with heart disease. And yet, when I had the most typical symptoms, which is the classic triad of pain under the breastbone that comes on with exercise, goes away with rest, what I do, I did what an awful lot of people do, is go into denial. So I figured, okay, this will go away. And of course, I knew that most chest pain is not due to heart disease.
Right.
So 3 days later, I'm back in the gym. 9.5 minutes into the same workout, the exact same thing happens. So this time I stop and I say, okay, I'm going to test what's going on. Goes away fairly quickly. I start up again. And this time in about 2 to 3 minutes, I start feeling that. Now I'm still thinking, okay, I know I don't have heart disease, but what would I tell somebody else who gave me this same symptom history? And
Right.
I think that was a very good pivot for me, because it's much harder to be objective about yourself than about somebody else.
Yep.
And as soon as I asked myself, what would I tell anybody else in this situation? The answer became obvious. And that's when I started getting my diagnostic workup, and that ended up within basically a week later, I was in the operating room.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Not as a patient, not as a doctor, but
Not as a doctor, but as the patient. Exactly. Exactly. One of your chapters, I think it's the second chapter, you talk about how the tests, you had to go through a battery of tests at the hospital that you worked at. right? You going throughout the facility and knowing the process you were comfortable with, but you weren't comfortable with it as a patient. You were comfortable with it as a doctor and as an anesthesiologist working with your colleagues. Now, those very colleagues are now turning to have to work on you. What was it like, and what was revealed to you through that process and beginning to get in touch with that new reality? Because as you know, with AI and technology and just, the stress of life now, the pace of life, the way things are going, there are many that are struggling with either health or jobs or finances, and they have to kind of take themselves through a test. And sometimes they may find themselves on the other side of, from a doctor to a patient, from being financially stable to having to figure things out. What was it for you that helped you to begin to embrace that new reality?
Well, of course, there's the thing that strikes immediately is the vulnerability that you're under.
Right.
Because as a doctor or as an advisor, you're not really vulnerable to anywhere near the degree that a patient is or the person you're advising, say financially. So that was something that I just essentially had to realize that was my then reality, and it needed to be approached in the same way that I approach my work, which is what is the problem and what's the best way to solve it.
Right.
And that's how I deal with when one of my patients has an issue, blood pressure gets low. What can I do to improve the situation? And that's what I needed to do as a patient for myself.
Exactly. Now, one of the things that Angela Duckworth talks about in her book around growth mindset and grit was that grit, being gritty, being someone who's willing to get into the trenches, but it requires a mindset shift, right? It requires having a mindset adjustment. What kind of mindset adjustments did you have to go through on that, and that someone would have to go through when they find themselves in that circumstance of, hey, I'm in a new reality. I am the patient now. I have to surrender to my colleagues, or I have to surrender to this situation and embrace it. But how can I do it with a growth mindset or a positive mindset and keep moving forward?
It's somewhat complex, but in my situation, an anesthesiologist has to be in charge of the situation in the operating room. I liken the head of an anesthesiologist to the periscope of a submarine. You're constantly scanning everything that's going on, all the monitors, the blood pressure, heart rate, oxygenation, blood loss, urine output. You're looking at everything constantly, just going back and forth. And when you become a patient, you kind of have to let go being in charge. And one of my colleagues who was going to do my anesthesia, I started asking him some questions like what kind of flow they're going to use on the heart-lung machine. He said, we'll use the right amount of flow. And that was sort of telling me, just you're not in charge of this one, so just take it easy and let us do what's good, right for you.
Right. Yeah.
And you have to accept that.
Yeah.
And obviously, you have to find people that you can trust.
Yeah.
And I had the one thing that was fortunate for me is that I knew the people who were taking care of me. I had seen them produce good results before. So I was perfectly comfortable. I knew I was in the best of hands.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing for people to do is find doctors and nurses in the hospital that they're comfortable with.
Yeah, I always tell people that when you are having to be someone who gets advice or input, whether it's medical care, whether it's financial care, social care, you want to find a tour guide, not a travel agent, right? A tour guide is someone who's been in the operating room, done it hundreds of times. You want to find the best of the best as much as possible. And I think we can do that in every area of our lives, is find the best of the best from advice, whether it's buying a book from someone who's one of the best and the best and learn from them that way, or the audio program, or taking a class from them, a virtual class or whatever, but just really getting in there and learning from people who have tons of experience, because that'll give you that comfort, right? Because although you had a lot of questions going in because of your knowledge as a doctor and anesthesiologist and knowing what needed to be done, you also had to surrender that. And you could surrender that when you could trust that the people who were guiding you through that process, right, had the competency to really make that happen. Now, when it comes to productivity, you talk in your book about rehabbing and the mindset and the body process of rehabbing. Many people struggle with maintaining their motivation at times when it comes to their productivity journey, right? You have your ebbs and flows. How does your book, Getting Better, just some of the stories or some of the things that you went through in the areas of rehab, help you sustain that improvement over a long period of time?
Yeah, I think obviously getting better is a cooperative effort.
Right.
You need your caretakers to be guiding you, but you have to put the work in to help yourself get better. So, for example, right after surgery, it's important to get out of bed and move around, because if you lie in bed, you can get clots in your legs. Those clots can go to your lungs. It's pulmonary embolus, and that can make you very sick and can be fatal.
Right.
And there are lots of cases of that happening. So being motivated is very important. And I thought that, before my surgery, my anesthesiologist told me, to remember that, to be sure to get out of bed and do sort of that sort of thing. And I was primed to do that, because when I was in college, I was a gymnast, and the guys on the gymnastics team would get back to the gym in about half the time they were told it would take to get well. So I used to think that doctors routinely exaggerated the amount of time it took to recover. Once I got into medicine, I realized that wasn't the case. It's just that people who are highly motivated and of course, in good health to begin with,
Right.
are going to recuperate faster. And so I was prepared to do exactly that. And I was going to, in my mind, I was going to recover as fast as anybody possibly ever has in the history of open heart surgery.
Right.
But it didn't turn out to be that way, because, life throws you curveballs. And so I had a bunch of complications along the way, and actually ended up staying in the ICU longer than average and staying in the hospital longer than average. But I did get back to work in the amount of time that was predicted.
Yeah, in fact, that kind of leads me into this other chapter you have called Adapt, Adapt, Adapt. And it's about that life throws you curveballs and surprises. When it comes to people and their productivity, barriers and challenges do come up. And what were some of the things that, as you were dealing with your barriers and things that you had to adapt very quickly with, what were some of the things and techniques that you used to kind of stay the course and keep your head in the game, if you will?
I think at every stage, there tends to be one problem that kind of dances on center stage and becomes the most important.
Yeah.
And at every stage, I try to ask myself, okay, what's bothering me the most? What can I do to deal with it? And some of the things that happened, I knew were complications of the surgery. Of course, I didn't know whether I was going to have them and to what degree. And others were a total surprise to me. So, for example, after I woke up, I was having trouble eating. Mm-hmm. And each meal became just this struggle. I mean, it was sputtering and coughing and just couldn't swallow. And I was not aware that this was a complication. They're the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
This was sort of an unknown to me. And then I finally got an ENT consult. I was told that this does happen after heart surgery. Not that common, but when it does, it almost always goes away in less than a month. And that's what happened. So once I found out that there was an end to the struggle, it became much, much easier to bear. And then there are other things that I knew about, but the way it presented became a surprise.
Yeah.
So when I was in medical school, I learned about the range of hiccups. Now, ordinarily, it's just a minor nuisance, but there have been people who have hiccup for months and years, and some have even died from respiratory failure when the diaphragm becomes exhausted and they couldn't breathe adequately anymore.
Oh, wow.
Now today you'd probably be put on a ventilator, but nevertheless, that occurs. And so I knew that surgery that can irritate the nerves going to the diaphragm, which is anything in the chest can do that, can sometimes cause hiccups. And right after surgery, I had some mild hiccups, and there's some drains that are put in, and as they come out, the hiccups should go away. But as my drains kept coming out, when the last one came out, I had like a staccato attack of hiccups. It was hiccup on top of hiccups like I'd never experienced before. It was like a staccato hiccups that would just go on and on and on and on, and then would slow down and stop, and then just long enough for me to think, oh, maybe this is over, and then it'd start up again.
Oh, wow.
And this went on for like a day and a half. And there are lots of different ways of treating hiccups. Some of them are like raising your arms above your head and swallowing hard. Yep. But after heart surgery, you can't raise your arms above your shoulders.
Right.
And swallowing brainy sugar, but I couldn't swallow rapidly. So pharmacologic things. But the first medicines that my doctors tried didn't do anything. And finally, after about a day and a half, I got a medicine that just sort of relaxed all musculature, and it also makes you go to sleep. So I slept for about the next day, and then they started backing up on it. So there were things that I was expecting, but not expecting so severely. Right. And then there were things that I wasn't expecting at all. But at each stage, what you have to do is ask, what's bothering me the most? Yeah. And what can I do to improve the situation? Right. And that's kind of the approach that I wanted to take it all along.
So let me ask you this question. And this was, as we were just talking, this one came to mind. Obviously, being a Yale-trained anesthesiologist, you've done hundreds of surgeries where you've oversaw the process. You've seen heart surgeries before. You've seen, just from reading your book, there's been, different types of surgeries you've seen where someone was wounded with a knife, or someone had a gunshot or something like that you had to participate in and see. And you kind of knew what they were going to go through from a theoretical standpoint, right? As a doctor, you researched it, you saw it. But how has that changed? So now you, as a doctor, having been on the other side as a patient and having gone through months, as you just explained, of rehab, of recovery, of experiencing things that you knew were going to come, but also experiencing some things that you had no idea they were going to come, and what it actually felt like in your body and the limitations and things. How does that now position you as a physician or an anesthesiologist? I know right now you're no longer practicing day to day. You're doing a lot more research, and you're emeritus, I believe, that level where you're more guiding and advising other doctors. But when you got back into practice, how did that experience that you went through change your sympathy, empathetic mindset with your patients and just guiding them? What did that do for you?
I think I've always been empathetic, and that's part of my training and part of my nature. Right. But having experienced it does give you a different perspective. And right. I think that nothing like being there to increase your level of empathy. So when I see people walking down the hallway carrying their IV pole and trudging along, I kind of have a deeper understanding of what they're going through. Yeah. And so one of the things I've tried to do is be more encouraging, not of the patients, but also my colleagues. I think one of the things that I wanted to do is, after going through this experience, I wanted to have something positive come out of it. Okay. And that's part of the reason that I wrote the book, because I felt I learned a lot from this experience.
Yeah.
And I thought by explaining it both as a patient, from a point of view of a patient and a doctor, I thought that would be helpful for other people facing a major illness.
Yes. Yeah. I thought that was really a really good perspective, because there's some chapters where you actually go into like what was going on and what they were getting ready to do. And it sounds like I'm talking to my doctor, right? Because you're like breaking it down, but it's broken down in a way where I can understand it as a reader, not too high level or not too deep. But then you, within the same chapter, you have another paragraph where now you're explaining that process that you're going through, where you explained it medically what you were going to experience, but now you're talking about what you're going through as a patient. A really creative nuance to the writing, because you actually got to see and experience through the book what a medical professional was going through when he's on both sides, if you will.
Yeah, it was quite a learning experience for me. And I think that hopefully other people will benefit from that as well, because I thought I could explain what was going on medically,
Yes.
But now I could explain pretty fully what I was feeling as a patient and what I was going through. And it's quite a struggle. I never say to patients after surgery that they're going to have no pain. I tell them that we'll be able to alleviate their pain to make it bearable. But anytime you have a major surgery, unfortunately you're going to have to go through some struggle.
Yeah. Yeah.
The end results are worth it. It's not easy. It can be very difficult, in fact.
Exactly. And I like the idea that you also talk in the book, and as we we're just talking here, that there were things that you knew that were going to be a challenge or struggle, and then there were things that happened to you that you did not know at all. Right. And that just happened, and you had to kind of bear through it and figure it out as you went along. So as we get ready to conclude here, I was thinking about the last chapter that I kind of wanted to focus on, which is kind of what we're already talking about. And that's a chapter you wrote in the book around reflection. And it was a shift in perspective. Right. And, someone who's looking to implement, let's say they go out and get the book Getting Better by Dr. Andrew Kadar, and they want to implement one of the ideas from the book, and even from our conversation today, that to enhance their productivity. What would you recommend? What is just that one nugget? And again, there's a lot, right? There's a lot of different things. And even in the beginning, we've talked about some, but what would be that one thing that you would recommend, and why?
Well, I think I want to go with two things. One is how to overcome denial. And that's essentially to take it away from yourself. What would you advise somebody else who had the same problem? And that happens in illness, but it can happen in other situations too, in your business. What would you advise a colleague who had the problem that you're having? And that way you can be more objective, because it's difficult to be objective about yourself.
Yeah.
And then I think to focus in at each point on what is the obstacle that's the greatest obstacle that I'm facing now, and what can I do to make the situation better?
Yeah.
And have that approach. And I do want to say a couple of other things as well. One is that having a major illness is a family affair.
Yes.
It affects your spouse, your colleagues, and I think that it's important to be considerate of your caretakers and to be appreciative of them. For example, there's a thing called caretaker exhaustion syndrome. Mm-hmm. And that's when somebody tries to take care of you, but they become exhausted from all the work that they have to do. So once I got out of the ICU at Cedars, a member of the family can stay with you overnight, but it's a narrow cot that's uncomfortable. And my wife stayed the first night. She didn't get much sleep between all the noises in the hospital and uncomfortable cot. So we decided it was best that she go home, because it would be better for her. She'd be better rested. And it would be better for me, because then she'd be in a better mood and have more energy to help me out. So you have to be considerate of the people who are taking care of you. And I think also understand that everybody among your caretakers, your doctors, your nurses, the technicians, their goal is to help you get better. So it's always a good idea to be appreciative and never be in a hostile situation with them. Now, it may be difficult when you're under stress, but that's something to keep in mind, that we're all on the same team.
Yeah. It does take it is a team effort. And when you're going through something, it's more than just yourself going through it. It's your whole family that's experiencing. If you have a spouse or a significant other, if you have children, they all are experiencing, the lack of you being there, the challenges that you're going through, the extra support that you're going to need, and they all are feeling the brunt of that. And that's one of the challenging things to do, is when you're in the middle of that as a patient, right, going through it, and you're the one in pain, is to pull yourself together and also think through, hey, how are the other people in my life feeling, and what are they going through, and how can I, even in this state, make life better for them as they're going through it, and knowing that it's okay for her to go home and get a good night's sleep and not be in the room with me, because it's going to help both of us to kind of have a better experience as we go through this. It's going to put her in a better mood, and it's going to help me as I go through this with understanding it. So Dr. Kadar, thank you so much for your insight, your wisdom, and for sharing the book, Getting Better. There's some really good insights. We only covered, I think, out of the 17 chapters, we only covered 7 topics. So there's a ton more insight and wisdom. And I love the way you wrote the book, because it's very story-like as you tell your story as you're going through this journey of your experience. And as you're going through the journey, you hear from the medical side of you in a very clear fashion, but you also hear from the patient side in a very vulnerable way, where you talk about certain things that I was like, wow, okay, he actually shared that. And there's some really cool stories in there. So thank you for the way you put that together. If someone wants to get to know you or learn more about you or get a copy of the book, where can they go?
Well, of course, the book is available where books are sold, primarily Amazon. It's available. The full title is Getting Better, A Doctor's Story of Resilience, Recovery, and Renewal.
Right.
And so that would be the best way. I also have a website. It's called gettingbetterdoc.com. So they can reach me through that as well.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Kadar, thank you so much for being a guest on the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be part of your good program.
Excellent. If you're enjoying the content and finding it valuable, we would appreciate it if you could take a moment and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and helps us reach a wider audience. If you leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. Not only does it help us improve the podcast, but it also helps us attract more sponsors and grow our community. Thank you again for your support and for listening to the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to Productivity Smarts, where we help you achieve your goals and live your best life. We hope you've gained valuable insights and actionable strategies to boost your productivity and increase your happiness and fulfillment. Remember to apply what you've learned and keep striving towards your goals. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring episodes and expert advice from our host, Gerald J. Leonard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and unleashing your productivity smarts.